It was a Friday night, the kind where the darkness seemed to settle in a little too comfortably, like a heavy blanket that you couldn't shake off. The rain tapped insistently on the windows, setting a gloomy tone. I was home alone, trying to relax after a long week, but something felt off. Emma, my wife, had gone out with her friends, or so she had said. It wasn't unusual for her to have a girls' night out, but lately she had been different. Distant. Distracted. And that night, the unease gnawed at me more than ever. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. I turned on the TV, flipping through channels aimlessly, but nothing could hold my attention. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my restless thoughts. It was a message from Mike, my best friend. He was out at some bar, trying to drag me along for a drink. I wasn't in the mood, so I ignored it, letting the phone buzz on the coffee table. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message from Mike. Curious, I picked up the phone and opened the message, expecting some stupid joke or a clip of him having fun at the bar. But as the video played, my world started to crumble. The video quality was poor, the lighting dim, but I could make out the scene clearly. A woman was dancing, no, not just dancing, she was giving a lap dance. She moved with a seductive grace, her body swaying in rhythm with the music, her hands trailing down the chest of a man sitting in front of her. He was grinning, his eyes following her every move, as were the other men around them, all of them hooting and cheering. For a second, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The woman's face was partially hidden by the shadows, but then she turned slightly, and the light caught her features. My heart stopped. It was Emma. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. My mind went blank, and all I could do was stare at the screen, watching in disbelief as my wife, my Emma, danced provocatively for another man. This wasn't some random woman. This was the person I had vowed to love and trust for the rest of my life. And here she was, in a seedy bar, selling herself for money. I dropped the phone, letting it clatter to the floor, my hands trembling. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened with the weight of betrayal. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to wake up from this nightmare. But no matter how hard I wished it away, the reality of it was undeniable. Emma was cheating on me. Not just emotionally, but physically. And she wasn't even trying to hide it, at least, not from everyone. Just from me. My thoughts raced as I tried to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Why would she do something like this? We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. If she needed money, why didn't she come to me? I would have given her anything she needed, done anything to make her happy. But instead, she had chosen this. To betray me in the most degrading way possible. As the initial shock began to fade, anger started to take its place. How dare she? How dare she do this to us, to our marriage? The woman I had loved and trusted was nothing but a liar, a deceiver. I stared at the phone, the screen now dark, as if mocking me. I couldn't bring myself to watch the video again, but I couldn't erase the image from my mind either. Emma, dancing for another man, letting him touch her, smiling at him in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. I felt sick. I needed answers, but I couldn't confront her, not yet. I wasn't ready. I needed to know more, to understand why she had done this. There had to be a reason, something that made sense, something that could explain why the woman I loved had turned into a stranger. So I waited. I waited for Emma to come home, pretending everything was normal, pretending I didn't know the truth. She came in late, smelling of alcohol and cigarettes, her clothes slightly disheveled. She kissed me on the cheek, her smile sweet and innocent, and asked how my night was. I mumbled something in response, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind screaming with questions I couldn't ask. As I lay in bed that night, my thoughts spiraled. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her again, dancing in that bar, her body moving for someone else. The betrayal burned deep, and I knew I couldn't keep this inside forever. But before I confronted her, I needed to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. I needed to know everything. Because once I opened that door, there would be no going back. And whatever I found, whatever the truth was, I knew it would change everything. The storm outside raged on, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside me. I had to be patient, to wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, I would make sure Emma understood exactly what she had done. The next day was a blur. I went through the motions of work, but my mind was elsewhere, trapped in a loop of anger, disbelief, and heartache. Every time I tried to focus, the image of Emma dancing in that bar crept back into my thoughts, gnawing at me, tearing at the edges of my sanity. I hadn't confronted her yet. I didn't know how to, not without losing control. When I got home that evening, Emma was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cooked dinner. The sight of her, so casual, so carefree, made my stomach turn. I couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal lurking beneath that sweet exterior. She had no idea that I knew, that the mask she wore so perfectly was slipping. I forced a smile, pretended to be interested in what she was saying, but inside, the rage was building. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, I found myself in the living room, staring at my laptop. My heart pounded as I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I didn't want to do this, didn't want to dig any deeper, but I knew I had to. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal, needed to understand just how far she had fallen. I opened the browser and typed in the name of the bar where Mike had filmed Emma. A quick search led me to a site that catered to the kind of clientele who frequented places like that, men looking for something sleazy, something they could buy for a few bucks and forget about in the morning. I felt disgusted with myself, but I couldn't stop. I scrolled through pages of photos, ads, and videos, searching for anything that might give me answers. Then I saw a video with a thumbnail that made my blood run cold. The title was vulgar, something about a bar worker being fucked hard by a group of men. My hand trembled as I moved the cursor over the play button. Part of me wanted to close the laptop, to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. I had to know. The video began with shaky footage, as if someone had filmed it on their phone. The setting was a private room in the same bar where Emma had danced. The lighting was dim, the air thick with the sounds of men's laughter and crude comments. And then I saw her, Emma. She was in the center of the room, surrounded by several men. Her expression was hard to read, but she wasn't resisting. If anything, she seemed to be going along with it, playing the part she had apparently chosen. The men took turns, treating her like a piece of meat, passing her around as if she were nothing more than an object for their amusement. My stomach churned as I watched, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't the woman I knew, the woman I had married. This was someone else, someone who had fallen so far from the person I had loved. I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed the laptop shut, my breathing ragged, my heart pounding in my chest. The room spun around me as the reality of what I had seen sank in. My wife, the woman I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. And now, the whole world could see it. The video was out there, spreading like wildfire, turning Emma into a public spectacle. I felt sick. The anger that had been simmering for days finally erupted. I wanted to smash something, to destroy everything around me. But most of all, I wanted to confront Emma, to make her understand the hell she had put me through. But as I sat there, seething with rage, I realized something else. This wasn't just about me. This was about the life we had built together, the trust she had shattered. I couldn't just lash out and expect everything to be okay. I needed to be smart, to think about what I was going to do next. I spent the rest of the night in the living room, unable to sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I thought about confronting Emma, about yelling and screaming, about making her feel the pain she had caused me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't enough. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a fight or an argument. By the time the sun began to rise, I had made up my mind. I would confront Emma, but I wouldn't let her see the rage boiling inside me. No, I would be calm, controlled. I wanted answers, and I wanted her to know just how deeply she had hurt me. But most of all, I wanted her to see that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. When Emma finally woke up, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of me. She greeted me with a smile, but I could see the confusion in her eyes as she took in my appearance. I must have looked like hell unshaven, dark circles under my eyes, my clothes rumpled from a sleepless night. "Morning," she said, her voice hesitant. "Are you okay?" I looked at her, trying to find some trace of the woman I had once loved, but all I could see was the lies, the deceit. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Emma's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of worry. "About what? About where you've been going at night?" I replied, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto hers. "About what you've been doing behind my back." Her face paled, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Then she laughed, a nervous, shaky sound. "What are you talking about?" "I haven't been doing anything, Don't lie to me, Emma." I cut her off, my voice cold. "I know everything." The color drained from her face completely now, and she took a step back, her hands trembling. I can explain, Then start explaining," I said, my tone harsh. "Because right now, I don't see how you can explain away what I've seen. What I know." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was beyond feeling sympathy, beyond feeling anything but the burning need for answers. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I needed money, and I didn't want to ask you. I thought I could handle it, that it would be quick and then it would be over. And so you decided to become a prostitute?" I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You decided to sell yourself to strangers instead of coming to me, your husband? How could you, Emma? How could you do this to us?" She didn't answer right away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I wanted to buy something," she finally said, her voice breaking. "Something I didn't think you'd understand." "What? What could possibly be worth throwing our marriage away?" I demanded, my voice rising. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "An iPhone 15, she whispered, as if the words themselves were a confession of her guilt. I stared at her, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. "An iPhone?" I repeated, incredulous. "You destroyed everything we had for a fucking phone?" She nodded, her tears falling freely now. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to ask you for the money, and I thought I could do this on my own." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was so absurd, so ridiculous, that for a moment I almost laughed. But then the reality of it all came crashing down on me, and the anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it all came flooding back. "You've ruined everything, Emma," I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "For what? A phone? A few dollars? Was it worth it? Was it worth destroying our marriage?" She didn't answer, just stood there, crying, her face a mask of regret and shame. But it was too late for regrets. The damage was done, and there was no going back. "I can't do this right now," I said, standing up and grabbing my keys. "I need some time to think. To figure out what the hell I'm going to do." Emma reached out, as if to stop me, but I pulled away, not wanting to feel her touch. "Please," she begged, her voice desperate. "Don't leave me. We can fix this. We can get through this, I swear." But I couldn't listen to her anymore. I needed to get away, to clear my head before I did something I would regret. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, leaving Emma standing in the kitchen, her sobs echoing in the empty house. As I drove away, my mind raced with thoughts of what I had seen, what I had heard. Emma's betrayal was deeper than I had ever imagined, and I knew that whatever came next, our lives would never be the same. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring past as my thoughts swirled in a chaotic storm. I couldn't escape the images burned into my mind: Emma's face, her body, her betrayal. The weight of it all pressed down on me, threatening to suffocate me with every breath. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, trying to make sense of her twisted logic. An iPhone 15? That was her excuse for tearing apart our life together? It seemed so trivial, so absurd, that it made the whole situation even more infuriating. Eventually, I found myself parked on a quiet street, far from our home. The only sound was the faint hum of the car engine, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I needed to think, to figure out my next move, but my mind was a mess. Every time I tried to focus, the memory of that second video, the one I had seen just hours before, clawed its way back to the forefront of my mind. Emma surrounded by those men, her expression void of the love and warmth I once knew. She had crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed, and the thought of her betrayal being out there, for anyone to see, made my blood boil. The humiliation was unbearable. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts, but eventually, my phone buzzed with a message. For a split second, I hoped it was something, anything that could distract me from the nightmare I was living. But when I checked, it was Mike again. He had sent me another video link, but this time, there was no message attached, just a link. I stared at it, dread creeping into my chest. The rational part of me knew I should just ignore it, that nothing good could come from opening that link. But curiosity, or maybe it was masochism, got the better of me. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating, but in the end, I couldn't resist. I clicked on the link, the video began to play, and immediately, I recognized the setting. It was the same bar, the same private room, but this time, the scene was even more explicit, more degrading than before. The camera angle was different, closer, capturing every sordid detail in high definition. And there, in the center of it all, was Emma. She was completely naked, her face contorted with an expression I couldn't read. Was it pleasure? Pain? Shame? I couldn't tell. The men were all over her, their hands groping, their voices loud and vulgar. They were laughing, cheering each other on as they took turns, and Emma, she wasn't resisting. She wasn't fighting them off. She was letting it happen. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to smash the screen, to throw the phone as far away as possible, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. This was my wife, the woman I had loved, and she was being degraded in the most unimaginable way. And the worst part was, she seemed to be enjoying it. The video ended with a chorus of cheers and crude remarks, the men slapping each other on the back, proud of their conquest. Emma was left alone on the floor, discarded like a piece of trash. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the tears streaming down her cheeks, mixing with the sweat and other fluids on her skin. But her eyes, they weren't just filled with shame. There was something else there, something darker. Resignation? Despair? I didn't know, and at that moment, I didn't care. I slammed the phone down on the passenger seat, my entire body shaking with rage. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. This was an atrocity, a violation that went beyond anything I could have imagined. And it was all out there, for anyone to see, for anyone to judge. I sat in the car, breathing heavily, my mind racing. How had it come to this? How had our lives spiraled so far out of control? I thought about all the moments we had shared, the love we had built, and how it had all been torn apart by this one unforgivable act. The woman in that video wasn't the Emma I knew, but it didn't matter. She had made her choice, and now, we both had to live with the consequences. I couldn't go back home, not yet. I wasn't ready to face her, to deal with the aftermath of what I had seen. But I couldn't just sit here, stewing in my anger. I needed to talk to someone, to get some kind of perspective before I did something I might regret. Without thinking, I dialed Mike's number. He picked up on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Hey man, you okay? Where are you?" I asked, my voice raw. "Still at the bar," he replied. "You want to come down? We can talk, yeah," I said, already starting the car. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. The drive to the bar was a blur. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, my emotions swinging wildly between rage and despair. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I was on the verge of losing it completely. Mike was waiting outside, leaning against his car, a concerned look on his face. As I got out, he walked over, studying me carefully. "You look like hell," he said, trying to lighten the mood, but I wasn't in the mood for jokes. "Let's just go inside," I muttered, pushing past him. The bar was crowded, filled with the usual mix of weekend revelers, but I barely noticed them. All I could see was the room in the back, the one where Emma had destroyed our marriage. Mike led me to a table in the corner, away from the noise, and we sat down. He ordered a couple of beers, but I couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands were still shaking, my mind still replaying that damned video. "So," Mike began, his voice low. "I'm guessing you saw it." I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't trust myself to keep it together if I opened my mouth. "I'm sorry, man," he said genuinely. "I didn't know how else to tell you. I figured it was better if you found out now, rather than later." "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not long," he admitted. "I was here a few nights ago with some guys from work, and I saw her. At first, I couldn't believe it, but then I realized it was her, and, well, you know the rest. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I demanded, my anger flaring up again. "Why didn't you stop her? What was I supposed to do?" Mike shot back, his own frustration showing. I didn't want to believe it either. And by the time I figured out what was going on, it was too late. I didn't want to make things worse. Worse? I laughed bitterly. How could it get any worse? Mike didn't have an answer for that. He just sat there, looking at me with a mixture of pity and helplessness. I hated that look, hated the fact that my best friend had seen my wife in a way I never should have. "What are you going to do?" he asked after a long silence. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I can forgive her for this. I don't even know if I want to." Mike nodded, understanding. "Whatever you decide, just know I've got your back, okay, yeah," I said, though it didn't feel like enough. "Thanks." We sat there in silence, the noise of the bar fading into the background as I tried to figure out what my next move was. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't see a way out of this mess that didn't end in more pain. One thing was certain, though things couldn't stay the way they were. Something had to change. And whether that meant confronting Emma, ending our marriage, or something else entirely, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. It was time to face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I didn't return home until the following evening. After spending the night at Mike's place, drowning in confusion and anger, I knew it was time to face the inevitable. I couldn't run from it any longer. I had to confront Emma and deal with the mess our lives had become. But this time, I was determined not to let my emotions control me. I needed answers, and I needed to know if there was any part of our marriage left worth saving. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the lights were on in the house, and Emma's car was parked where it always was. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the rage bubbling beneath the surface was hard to suppress. I was about to walk into a confrontation that could end everything we had built together, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the sound seemed to echo through the quiet house. Emma was in the living room, sitting on the couch with her phone in hand. She looked up when I walked in, her face pale and eyes red from what looked like hours of crying. But I didn't feel any sympathy. I was too angry, too hurt to care about her tears. "You're back," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Yeah," I replied, my tone flat. I closed the door behind me and walked into the room, standing just a few feet away from her. "We need to talk." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know. I've been waiting for you to come home." "I don't know what to say. How about the truth?" I snapped, unable to keep the anger out of my voice. "No more lies, no more excuses. I want to know everything." "Why, Emma? Why did you do this to us?" She flinched at the harshness in my tone but didn't look away. I never meant to hurt you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what else to do. I felt like I was drowning, like I couldn't breathe." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my frustration growing. "Drowning? We weren't struggling, Emma. If you needed money, you could have just asked me. We could have figured something out together. But instead, you went behind my back and did this." Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I needed to hear the truth, no matter how painful it was. "I felt trapped," she said, her voice cracking. "I know it sounds stupid, but I wanted something for myself, something that was mine. You know how it is, you work, you come home, and it's the same routine every day. I just wanted to break out of it, to feel like I had control over something. And you thought selling yourself was the answer? I asked, incredulous. You thought that would give you control. I didn't think it would go this far. She admitted, her tears flowing freely now. It started with just dancing, just a way to make some extra money. But then, I don't know what happened. I got in over my head, and I couldn't stop. I was too afraid to tell you, too ashamed of what I was doing. Afraid? Ashamed? I echoed, my voice rising. You should be ashamed, Emma. You destroyed everything we had. For what? A few dollars? A fucking phone? Was it worth it? She didn't answer, just buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the videos, the way she had let those men touch her, degrade her, and all the sympathy drained away, replaced by a cold, hard fury. Look at me, I said, my voice cold and commanding. She slowly lifted her head, her eyes swollen and red. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? To us? Or were you too busy chasing your own selfish desires? I didn't want to hurt you. She repeated, her voice weak. I lost myself, and I didn't know how to come back. I shook my head, unable to comprehend how the woman I had loved for so long could have done something so reckless, so destructive. Do you even realize what you've done? It's not just the money, Emma. It's not just the lies. It's everything. Those videos, do you know they're out there? Anyone can see them. Anyone can watch what you did. Do you understand that? She nodded, her face a mask of despair. I know, and I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I don't know how to fix this. Fix this? I laughed bitterly. You think this can be fixed? There's no coming back from this, Emma. You've ruined everything. She didn't argue, didn't try to defend herself. She just sat there, broken and defeated, as the weight of her actions finally seemed to crush her. What do you want me to do? She asked after a long silence, her voice barely audible. I don't know. I admitted, my anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. But I need time to think, to figure out what I'm going to do. She nodded, her hands trembling. I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. Just please don't leave me. I didn't respond. I didn't have the strength to offer her any comfort, not after everything that had happened. I turned away, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me, and walked out of the room. I headed to the guest room, shutting the door behind me and leaning against it, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to overwhelm me. Everything had fallen apart, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. Emma's betrayal had cut so deep, it felt like there was nothing left to salvage. As I lay down on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the image of those videos from my mind. Emma, the woman I had loved and trusted, had become a stranger to me, someone I no longer recognized. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again, didn't know if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive her. But one thing was certain, our lives would never be the same. And whatever decision I made next would change everything. The days that followed were a fog of suppressed emotions and mounting tension. I avoided Emma as much as I could, locking myself away in the guest room, trying to drown out the world with mindless tasks and distractions. But the rage, the sense of betrayal, it was always there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the moment I would finally confront it. I knew I couldn't keep going like this, something had to give. The anger was eating me alive, and the humiliation, knowing those videos were out there for anyone to see, was more than I could bear. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had to do something drastic. But it couldn't just be about ending things with Emma, it had to be more. She needed to understand the depth of the pain she had caused, and I needed to feel like I had regained control. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the house in a dim, orange glow, I sat in the living room, nursing a drink. The liquor burned as it went down, but it did little to numb the storm raging inside me. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Mike. "How are you holding up, man?" he asked. I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "I don't know. I can't stop thinking about it. I feel like I'm going crazy. His reply came almost instantly. Don't do anything stupid. You need to stay calm. Think things through. But calm wasn't in the cards for me. Not anymore. As I sat there, swirling the amber liquid in my glass, an idea began to form in my mind. It was reckless, maybe even dangerous, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If Emma could betray me so completely, why shouldn't I play by my own rules? I downed the rest of the drink and stood up, a new resolve taking hold. I wasn't going to let Emma walk away from this unscathed. I wasn't just going to divorce her and move on, that would be too easy. No, I needed to make sure she felt the same pain, the same humiliation that she had inflicted on me. And I knew exactly how to do it. That night, I didn't go to the guest room. I went back to the bedroom, where Emma was already in bed, the covers pulled up to her chin. She looked up at me, surprised, as I walked in. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice wary. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady, almost casual. She sat up, pulling the covers tighter around her. "About what? About us?" I replied, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "About where we go from here." Emma's eyes flickered with a mix of hope and fear. "I didn't think you'd want to talk. You've been avoiding me. I've been thinking," I said, ignoring her comment. "About everything that's happened, about what you did." She lowered her gaze, guilt flashing across her face. "I know I've hurt you. I know I messed up. But I still love you, and I want to make things right. That's the thing, Emma," I said, leaning closer. "You can't make things right. What you did, it can't be undone. But that doesn't mean we can't find a way forward." She looked up at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we can work this out," I said, my voice taking on a softer tone. "Maybe we can find a way to get past this." Her eyes widened with a glimmer of hope. "You mean that? You're willing to try?" I nodded slowly. "But it's not going to be easy. You have to be honest with me, completely honest. No more lies, no more secrets, I swear," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll tell you everything. I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," I said, leaning back slightly. "Because I have some questions, and I need you to answer them truthfully, okay?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Why did you do it, Emma? Why did you think selling yourself was the solution?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "I told you. I felt trapped. I wanted something for myself, something that was mine, and was it worth it?" I asked, my tone cold. "Was it worth losing everything we had?" Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, it wasn't. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I'm so sorry." I watched her cry, but the sight no longer stirred any sympathy in me. Instead, it fueled my resolve. This was what she deserved, this pain, this guilt. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. "Emma," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to know everything. Who were those men? How many times did you do it?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Why does that matter?" "Because I need to know," I said, my voice hardening. "If we're going to move forward, I need to understand what happened. All of it." She hesitated again, but finally she nodded. "It was just a few times, with a few men. I didn't know them, didn't care about them. It was just business, business," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "And the videos? Did you know they were being filmed?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was telling the truth. But at this point, it didn't matter. Whether she knew or not, the damage was done. And now, it was time to do what I had come here to do. "Okay," I said, standing up. "Thank you for being honest." She looked up at me, confusion marring her tear-streaked face. "What now? Now we move forward," I said, walking over to the nightstand where I had left my phone. "But first, there's something I want you to see." She watched as I picked up my phone and tapped on the screen. The video I had recorded earlier that day started playing a video of me, talking directly to the camera, detailing everything Emma had done. I talked about the lap dances, the prostitution, the videos. I laid it all out, sparing no details. Her eyes widened in horror as she watched, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. What is this? I said, my voice calm. Is my insurance policy. I've sent this video to a few trusted people, Mike included. If anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I get into an accident, this video will be released to the public. Everyone will know what you did. Her face turned ashen, her lips trembling. You wouldn't I? I asked, arching an eyebrow. You took everything from me, Emma. Now it's my turn. She collapsed back onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I stood there, watching her break down, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. This was the power I had been searching for, the control I needed to take back my life. She had humiliated me, and now, she would live with the fear of that same humiliation hanging over her head every single day. Remember, Emma, I said, turning to leave. This is only the beginning. You'll never know when, or if, that video will get out. But you'll always wonder. With that, I walked out of the bedroom, the sound of her sobs following me down the hallway. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I had done what I needed to do, and as I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Emma would never forget what she had done. And neither would I doubt I in the days that followed. A tense silence settled over the house. Emma and I became strangers living under the same roof, passing each other like ghosts, the weight of our unspoken war hanging heavy in the air. Every interaction was laced with an undercurrent of dread, as if we were both waiting for the other to make the next move. Emma had become a shell of the woman she once was. She no longer tried to reach out, no longer left notes, or made any attempts to bridge the chasm between us. Instead, she moved through the house like a shadow, her eyes hollow, her movements mechanical. I could see the fear in her, the uncertainty gnawing at her every moment. She knew that at any time, I could release that video, shattering whatever remnants of her life she still clung to. The power was mine, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was in control. But even as I watched her crumble, a nagging thought began to creep into my mind. Was this really what I wanted? I had taken back control, made her feel the pain she had inflicted on me, but where did it leave me? The anger and satisfaction I had felt initially were starting to fade, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I had achieved my goal, but at what cost? Was this the life I wanted to live in, a house filled with resentment, where every day was a reminder of the betrayal that had torn us apart? I found myself thinking more and more about the future. What was my endgame? What was I trying to achieve? Was it enough to keep Emma under my thumb, to hold this threat over her indefinitely? Or was there something more I needed to do to truly move on? The questions haunted me, but no answers came. Every night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. And the truth was, I didn't know if I had the strength to keep fighting. One evening, as I sat in the living room with a drink in hand, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. I knew it was Emma. She had been avoiding me for days, but I could feel the tension in the air, knew that something had shifted. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "What is there left to say?" She hesitated, and I could hear the tremble in her breath. "I can't keep living like this. I know I've done terrible things, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But this isn't living. It's torture." "Torture?" I echoed, my voice cold. "Isn't that what you deserve?" She didn't respond immediately, but I could hear the catch in her throat, the struggle to keep her composure. "Maybe I do deserve it. But what about you? Do you want to live like this? Do you want to be stuck in this cycle of anger and hate forever?" I didn't answer. Her words hit too close to home, touching on the very thoughts that had been plaguing me. "I know I can't undo what I did," she continued, her voice stronger now. But we can't go on like this. We're destroying each other. I turned around to face her. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy, her face pale. But there was a resolve in her that hadn't been there before, a determination that surprised me. What do you suggest? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Let's end this, she said, her voice steady. For both of our sakes. Let's end the marriage, split everything, and go our separate ways. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I could see that she was serious, that she had thought this through. And as much as I wanted to keep fighting, to keep punishing her, I knew deep down that she was right. This war we were waging was destroying us both, and there was no victory to be had here, only more pain. Okay, I said after a long pause. But it's going to be on my terms. She nodded, accepting my conditions without protest. Whatever you want. I just want to move on. I can't live like this anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. We'll talk to the lawyers, split everything evenly. You'll leave with what's yours, and I'll keep what's mine. But the moment you try to take more than you deserve, that video gets released. Her face crumpled, but she nodded again. I understand, and one more thing. I added, my voice low and firm. I want you out of here by the end of the week. The words were like a final nail in the coffin, sealing the fate of our marriage. I watched as she absorbed them, the realization sinking in that this was really happening. I'll start packing tonight, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I turned away from her, focusing on my drink, and listened as she walked away, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls of our once happy home. The next few days passed in a blur. Emma kept to her word, packing her things and preparing to leave. I avoided her as much as possible, spending most of my time out of the house or locked away in the guest room. I didn't want to watch her leave, didn't want to face the reality of what was happening. But I knew it was for the best. This was the only way we could both escape the hell we had created. On the last day, as she finished loading the last of her things into her car, she stopped at the door and looked back at me. There was a sadness in her eyes, a sense of finality that made my chest tighten. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. For everything. I nodded, but didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. She hesitated for a moment, as if she wanted to say more, but then she turned and walked out the door, closing it softly behind her. I watched through the window as she got into her car and drove away, the taillights fading into the distance. And just like that, it was over. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty street, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, sadness, anger, they all mixed together in a confusing blur. I had won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like an ending, a bitter conclusion to a story that had once been filled with love and hope. But it was done. The marriage was over, and Emma was gone. As I sat down on the couch, the silence of the house pressing in on me, I realized that for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. The war was over, and now, I could finally start to rebuild. To move on. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know how I would heal from the scars of what had happened. But I knew one thing for certain, I had survived. I had come out the other side, battered and bruised, but still standing, and that, for now, was enough. The silence in the house was deafening after Emma left. It was a silence that felt both oppressive and liberating, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for anything to happen. I spent those first few days alone, drifting through the rooms like a ghost, unsure of how to start putting my life back together. The war was over, but the battle scars remained, deep and raw. I threw myself into work, into distractions, anything to keep my mind from wandering back to the memories that haunted me. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now felt empty, hollow, as if the life had been drained from it. And maybe it had. Emma was gone, and with her, so was the life we had built together. I should have felt relief, satisfaction even, but instead, all I felt was a gnawing emptiness. It was late one evening, about a week after Emma had left, when the phone call came. I had been sitting in the living room, mindlessly watching TV, trying to escape the void that seemed to be closing in on me. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet, and I answered it without thinking. "Hello?" I said, barely paying attention. Is this Mr. Collins?" A somber voice asked, unfamiliar and laced with an urgency that made me sit up straight. "Yes, this is he," I replied, my heart starting to pound in my chest. "Who is this?" "This is Detective Harris with the local police department. I'm afraid I have some bad news. It's about your wife, Emma." The world seemed to stop spinning in that moment. My breath caught in my throat, and I gripped the phone tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though deep down I already knew the answer. "There's no easy way to say this," the detective continued, his voice gentle. "We found her this evening in a hotel room. I'm so sorry, Mr. Collins, but it appears she took her own life." The words hit me like a sledgehammer, knocking the wind out of me. I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't process what I had just heard. Emma dead? It didn't seem real. It couldn't be real. There was a note, the detective added after a moment of silence. "She left it for you. It was addressed to you specifically. We'll need you to come down to the station to identify her and collect her belongings." The rest of the conversation was a blur. I don't remember what I said, don't remember how I ended the call or how I managed to pull myself together enough to drive to the police station. All I knew was that I had to see her, had to confirm with my own eyes that this nightmare was real. When I arrived at the station, the detective met me at the front desk, his expression filled with the kind of sympathy that only made the pain sharper. He led me to a small, dimly lit room where Emma's body lay on a cold metal table, covered with a sheet. I stared at the sheet, unable to move, unable to breathe. "Take your time," the detective said quietly, stepping back to give me space. With trembling hands, I reached out and pulled the sheet back, revealing Emma's face. She looked peaceful, almost as if she were sleeping, but there was a finality to it that I couldn't ignore. Her skin was pale, her eyes closed, and I knew, without a doubt, that she was gone. I felt a sob rising in my throat, but I choked it back, forcing myself to remain composed. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. This wasn't how any of it was supposed to end. After what felt like an eternity, the detective gently touched my arm, breaking me out of my trance. "She left this for you," he said, handing me a folded piece of paper. I took the note, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely open it. The paper was worn, as if she had folded and unfolded it many times before finally deciding to leave it behind. As I began to read, the words blurred through my tears. "Dear Tom, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person, but I didn't have the strength to face you after everything I've done. I know I've hurt you in ways that can never be forgiven, and I don't expect you to forgive me. This is my final act of cowardice, and for that, I'm truly sorry. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I was lost, even when I made the worst decisions of my life, I loved you. But I was broken, Tom. So broken that I couldn't see a way out. I thought I could fix myself, but the truth is, I've been drowning for a long time, and I've finally gone under. The pain I caused you was something I'll never forgive myself for. I saw the hurt in your eyes, the betrayal, and it crushed me every single day. But I couldn't find the words to make it right. I was selfish and stupid, and now it's too late. Please don't hate me, Tom. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day you can find it in your heart to let go of the anger. I can't bear the thought of you carrying that weight forever because of me. You deserve to be happy, to find peace, even if I couldn't. I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused you, for the life I destroyed. If I could go back and change it all, I would. But I can't. All I can do now is ask for your forgiveness, not for me, but for you, so you can move on without this burden. I'm so sorry, Tom. I never wanted this for us. I never wanted to be the one to destroy everything we built together. I hope you find the happiness you deserve, the love that you were always so willing to give me. Goodbye, my love. I hope one day you'll remember the good times, the love we shared before everything went wrong. And I hope, wherever you go from here, you find the peace that eluded me. With all my love, Emma. The words blurred and twisted in my vision, each sentence slicing through me like a blade. I dropped the note, my hands trembling uncontrollably as the reality of her death, of her final words, crushed me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but collapse into the chair behind me, burying my face in my hands as the tears finally came. Emma was gone. Forever. And with her went any chance of redemption, any hope of closure. I had wanted to punish her, to make her feel the pain she had caused me, but I never wanted this. I never wanted her to feel like death was the only way out. I sat there, crying like I hadn't cried in years, as the weight of everything that had happened came crashing down on me. The betrayal, the anger, the revenge, it all felt so meaningless now, so hollow. What had I gained? What had I lost? When I finally managed to pull myself together, I folded the note carefully and placed it in my pocket. It was the last piece of her I had, the final words she had left behind. I stood up, feeling the weight of my grief pressing down on me, and walked out of the room. The detective met me outside, his expression somber. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Collins. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded, unable to find the words to respond. The drive home was a blur, the world outside passing by in a haze. When I finally walked through the front door, the silence of the house enveloped me once again, but this time, it was different. This time, it was the silence of finality, of an ending that could never be undone. I sat down on the couch, pulling out Emma's note and reading it again, letting her words wash over me. The pain was unbearable, but it was a pain I knew I had to face. Emma was gone, and there was no going back. All that was left now was to try to find a way to live with the aftermath. As the night wore on, I thought about the life we had shared, the love that had once been so strong. I thought about the woman I had fallen in love with, the good times we had before everything went wrong. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself remember the Emma I had loved, the Emma who had been my world. The anger, the resentment, it was still there, but so was something else. A deep, aching sorrow for what could have been, for the life we had lost. And as I sat there in the darkness, I made a silent promise to her, to myself. I would find a way to forgive. Not for her, not even for me, but because it was the only way to move forward, the only way to honor the love we had once shared. Emma was gone, but her memory, her final words, would stay with me forever. And somehow, I would find a way to live with that, to carry on.